Okay, I think we're going to get started. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming to attend our State Plan on Aging listening session. This is our final listening session of our series of 10 different listening sessions that we had statewide. So thank you for coming on your lunch break. If you came on your lunch break and spending time with us to kind of provide your feedback and information for us to help us move forward and plan as an agency within the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services. So we'll start off with a quick introduction and do a real quick welcome and give you some background information and an overview of why we have the State Plan on Aging, what the State Plan on Aging is for, and why the state of New Hampshire Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services is required to have a state plan. And then we'll get to the meat of the meeting today, which is our question and answer process. We have a series of 5 questions that we'll walk through to really talk about how things are working, how they're not working, what we can do to improve things. We'll have a question on social isolation, as well as how we can improve our systems. So, and that's really the key here, and really encourage you guys to provide us your feedback and information, your experience. If you have experiences you want to share with us, it's truly your opportunity to inform the state and talk to the state about how older adult services are working in New Hampshire. Then we'll go and I'll advertise really quickly the ways that you can give feedback besides our listening sessions, because we do have an active online survey that we're using to capture some responses. And just a real quick caveat to that, if you are here today and you provide some information, we encourage you to still take our survey, because our survey has a lot of different questions. Our survey gets a little bit more into the details of our programs and more specific questions that help identify the population and help us identify and prioritize our needs moving forward. And then we'll talk about next steps as we move forward and what we plan on doing with the state plan and how we use the state plan every year, even though it's a 4-year process. So my name is Tom O'Connor, and I'm the Home and Community-Based Service Administrator within the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services. I've been working for BEAS now for 5 years, but I've been working with the state for 20 years in total. I've had 15 years at the Division of Children and Families prior to transitioning to the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services. We also have a couple other members of the BEAS team here with us. I have Tina Goulet, who's our family caregiver specialist. She'll be helping track some of the notes. I have Rachel Lakin, who is our adult protection administrator. And let me see, anyone else from the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services? No? And then we have from the Department of Health and Human Services, we have Joan Marcoux that's helping supporting our assistive technology needs for these events. So thank you very much, Joan, for coordinating our captioning and as well as our sign language support for today's event. So again, I'm very pleased to welcome you to our 2023 listening session. This State Plan on Aging listening sessions help inform our state plan, which is a 4-year state plan that we treat as a roadmap for how we engage the individuals that we serve with our services within the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services. So this plan that we create over the next few months, which will be informed by our listening sessions and our surveys, will last from 2024 and then into 2027. And then we will likely start engaging in a similar process to what we did this time in 2027 to prepare for our state plan moving forward. One thing that's important to BEAS is that our state plan is something that's very actionable. It's something that's a living, breathing document. As I mentioned before, it's our roadmap that helps guide us in the best way that we can support the older adults within New Hampshire. As we know, New Hampshire is very unique and has very different challenges, as geographically it's very different. We have areas of the state that are very resource rich. We have other areas of the state that are somewhat resource deficient. And at the same time, we do everything we can to provide services statewide. So again, this is the plan that really helps drive that work and really points us and steers us in the work that we do every day. The State Plan on Aging is developed by the Department of Health and Human Services, but we have some key partners that we also work with on developing our state plan. One of which is, we have Jennifer Rabelais here, if you can just say hello. And she is from the Alliance for Healthy Aging. She's also from the Center on Aging and Community Living and the Institute on Health Policy and Practice and IOD.
Institute on Disability.
Yes, Institute on Disability. So thank you for coming and supporting our work on this. It's been quite the endeavor. So, and then we have Chris Dugan, who is here, and he's part of the State Commission on Aging, but also supports AHA as well. So thank you, Chris, for being here, and you've been a big part of helping getting the word out and spreading information and sharing information with the Bureau as you received it on your own. So thank you for all that. Really, the state plan marks an opportunity for us to kind of look at how we frame our plan. One thing that we've worked on recently is really, we're looking into our, for example, the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services, really looking at renaming our bureau in an effort to be more age-friendly and sensitive to the idea that the word elderly sometimes is offensive for some individuals. And so maybe we need to really look at how we name our bureau and how we identify ourselves to better align with how we want to use supports and services in New Hampshire and within the work that we do. So it's, again, a huge part of reframing the work that we do, providing the roadmap on how we're going to do that work, and really how we're going to engage the community at large to help steer us in the right direction. As we all know, and I'm sure we faced at many different levels, we're in unique times. We're coming out of a pandemic. Although we're coming out of it, I don't think our landscape is going to change much. Our landscape has changed dramatically through the pandemic, and I see that continuing as we move forward. So that's another thing that we're going to keep in mind as we develop our state plan is, what are some great practices that came out of our response to the pandemic? Or what are some challenges we faced that we identify that we're really struggling with and we need to get better at? So all those things we really want to try to focus on as we move forward with our state plan. So again, the state plan is developed every 4 years, and it is a federal requirement of the Older Americans Act. Older Americans Act is one of our, the Administration for Community Living is our federal partner, and the Older Americans Act is legislation on the federal level that helps really draft the guidance that we use to help develop programs to help serve older adults throughout New Hampshire. So ACL is our federal partner, but one of the challenges we've seen statewide is that we're one of the smaller states. And although we're one of the fastest aging states in the country, we find that our funding does not always match what our needs are in New Hampshire. So we're always facing that challenge of really how do we maximize our funding and make sure we're putting our funding where it really truly belongs and where it's needed the most. Because one of the charges that we have through the Older Americans Act is really making sure we're focusing on serving our most vulnerable individuals and as well as people who are at most financial risk for service and need for services. So that's really a federal charge on us and one that we take seriously within the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services, and really helps inform what our state plan looks like and the services that we provide to everybody. So as I mentioned, the plan is being developed by the Department of Health and Human Services, the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services, but it's also helping be informed by our partners at New Hampshire AHA and our State Commission on Aging. So after we develop our draft, which really is informed again by our listening sessions, the results that we get in our surveys, really it's helping inform our process moving forward. But ultimately, our plan will be signed by the Governor of New Hampshire. It'll also be signed by the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Chair of our State Commission on Aging, who is currently Stu Luca. But again, to reiterate, the most important part is that the information is coming from you guys to really help inform this plan. So the State Plan on Aging, again, will be a 4-year plan. So this plan will inform from 2024 through 2027. And the goal of the State Plan on Aging is to advance the state's efforts in understanding, serving, supporting, and celebrating adults across New Hampshire. The State Plan on Aging is integral to really the tangible outcomes that we expect through the services that we provide. It really helps us to translate the activities and the actions that we take to deliver the services across the state, and it truly provides the blueprint for the work that we do and helps us gather the data and the information that we need to provide our federal partners in order to continue to receive funding for these services. And also, it's with great hope that in concert with our state, as well as our federal partners, that it really helps build capacity within our aging network across New Hampshire. So as I mentioned, our federal partners is the Alliance for Community Living, and so, the Administration for Community Living, and they are driven and they are basically regulated by the Older Americans Act. The Older Americans Act was developed back in 1965. It has, at the same time that Medicare and Medicaid was developed as well, which over the years we've seen that our systems have had to evolve and really figure out how those three main programs can work together to help better serve the adults across New Hampshire. The adults with, our aging adults, as well as adults with disabilities across New Hampshire. So it really provides the home and community-based social service network for our adult population. While each state administers its own support services, the federal regulation mandates that the services are targeted to our older individuals of greatest economic need, our older individuals with greatest social need, with particular attention to low-income minority individuals, older adults residing in rural areas, and low-income individuals and frail individuals. So just a real quick overview and some highlights. So the State Plan on Aging is guiding, again, by the information we gathered from you guys here today and through our survey that we have both online, and we have it available for you here today as well. If you decide you want to fill out your survey in person and you want to leave it with us, we will take it back with us. Or if you want to take it home, fill it out, and bring it back to the Cash Center, we'll make sure that we're able to pick up your responses before our end date. And our survey is set to end on February 17th. So there's still a couple more weeks, even after our listening sessions, to provide some income. And you'll see later on another slide, we have some website addresses that you can access the survey, as well as a QR code that if you scan that QR code, it'll bring you directly to the survey, and you can fill the survey in at that point. So the state plan is influenced by 5 federal priorities, and those federal priorities are really advancing equality across the state, building a caregiver infrastructure. We do have a caregiver program within the state, and it's administered through our service link network across all the service links across New Hampshire. But we still need to continually monitor that program, making sure we're meeting needs. You know, a lot of our services and elderly and adult services are underfunded. So really looking at how we can maximize the funding that we do get for our caregiver program to help meet the needs of our caregivers. As we know, the caregivers that are providing care to the older adults across New Hampshire are some of our most valuable assets in New Hampshire. Another priority is expanding access to home and community-based services, which I mentioned before. We have a very diverse geographic area in New Hampshire that we have to really navigate through to make sure that everyone's receiving services. So really having and thinking about that as we develop our programs and how we're going to really make that more available to individuals, and especially in those really rural areas, so again, we can maximize our efforts to best meet the needs across the whole state. And then, as I mentioned before, really to look at and discuss recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. As I had mentioned before, a lot of great programs came from that. We shifted some of our work into telehealth, for example, and some of our in-home care and our adult day programs. And that was extremely helpful. And we saw cases where, you know, just through a telehealth virtual video conference, people were able to identify that somebody was either suffering due to a medical episode or just not looking well. And so what that resulted in is someone actually going into the home and checking on the individual, even though we were in a pandemic state, to make sure that they were okay. And in some situations, that saved an individual's life. So those are practices we'll definitely want to keep moving forward with, and supporting but as we know, with that comes a challenge in the North Country around technology, right? There's not a lot of internet in the North Country, or there's a lot of gaps in internet service in the North Country. So we got to make sure we're really looking at how we can make sure that all our older adults have that opportunity to have technology if they need it to help better meet their needs. And then lastly, is supporting older American core programs. And again, it's really looking at the programs that we already have in place. Some of our older American Act core programs are some of our nutrition Meals on Wheels programs, our in-home care programs, as well as our adult day programs. Those are all served under the Older Americans Act funding that we receive. So it's really looking into those programs, seeing maybe where we need to shift. Talk about the fact that during the pandemic, gas prices went up, the cost of food went up, the cost of living in general went up for everybody. But it went up for our providers as well, so we had to shift gears and really look at the rates that we provide to them. You know, luckily we got some pandemic funding to support that, but as we move forward and that pandemic funding goes away, we're back to our Older Americans Act funding, which creates a challenge, because if we're raising our rates, our ability to serve more individuals becomes limited. And so those are all things that we have to really think about and really work together on advocating at the state level for more funding or more flexibility in some areas where we can possibly provide them within the rules that govern our programs to better meet everyone's needs. So as I had mentioned, the plan that we developed is a 4-year plan. Our draft of that plan is due to ACL on July 1st of this year. And then it'll be finalized and needs to be approved before October 1st. And that's when our state plan will start, is October 1st. So. All right. So as I mentioned, we've had many opportunities to help inform the state plan. We've had 5 listening sessions virtually, which were online listening sessions. We had our last night, which was well attended, and just gives everyone an opportunity, especially if you're not comfortable coming out in the community with the increased cases of COVID or the different variants that are out there, and you just want to still participate. We allowed that option to happen for some individuals that want to do that. But we've also had 5 in-person listening sessions, and today's session here at the Cashin Center is our last in-person listening session that we have. So we've had in-person listening sessions in Conway at the Gibson Center, up in Berlin at the Berlin Nutrition Center. We've had them down in Keene at the Home Health Care and Hospice in Keene. We had one in Concord over at the Good Life in Concord. And then we have one here today, and it's very well attended, and again, I appreciate everyone being here today. So the State Plan on Aging, as we do the listening session, we've drafted some goals that we want to make sure we adhere to, and it's really to provide an overview, which I hopefully did for you guys, just a few minutes ago. Engage the older adult population in the development and promotion of the State Plan on Aging. And if you want to get an idea of really what that state plan looks like, in the slide later on, we'll have a website link that will have a link to our current state plan. And that'll just give you an idea of kind of what the state plan has in it, what to expect in our state plan as we move forward in the finalization of this iteration of our state plan. It's also to discuss what is going well, what really needs attention across our state, as well as opportunities in our communities, either now and hopefully into the future as well. And then lastly is to begin collecting this information and feedback from you all, put it together, and really help us prioritize what our needs will be that we talk about within our state plan. So again, it's informed by you, and I can't reiterate enough how important the engagement of you all here today is in the development of our state plan. If you're not comfortable speaking here and you want to fill out your survey, as I mentioned, and put some comments in your survey, please feel free to do that. We'll be able to capture those comments and make sure that we include that in our thoughts as we develop our plan. So as I mentioned, I have 5 questions that I'm going to ask you today. And one thing I really want to encourage is that we have a few people that will have microphones that can come to you. So if you have a response, I really request that you speak into the microphone with your response, because we're not sure what everyone's hearing level is in the room today, and we want to really make sure everyone has a good understanding of what you're saying, and also it's important for them to hear what you're saying, because that could trigger some thoughts in them to also want to respond and share some experience or share some thoughts as well. So the 5 questions that we're going to ask is really what's going well in New Hampshire in regards to services for our aging population. Our second question would be, naturally, what's not going well. Third question would be around how we can really better serve and support our aging population, both today and into the future. Then what are the needs that you identify as you are hoping to age in your home? So what will you need for yourself in order to be able to age in home as you get older? And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about social isolation and how we can reduce social isolation across the state, because that's one of the biggest things we've seen as the outcome of the pandemic, is more and more older adults are more isolated, both in their homes and in their communities, and are not able to take advantage of services the way they'd like to. So with that said, we will move into the first question. So our first question, and I'll ask Jennifer to come and grab this mic, and I'm going to switch over to a different microphone that you guys will hopefully still hear me on. Thank you. Check, check. Not working yet. There we go. Okay, so our first question is, what is working well in New Hampshire? Who has some thoughts about things that are really working well?
A year and a half ago, I came from New York. I was very ill and I couldn't live alone, so I had to come and live with my daughter. And the thing that really worked well for me was this center. It brought me out of isolation. It gave me things to do. And socializing is one of their high points. So definitely, this place is one of the things that's working well.
Oh, that's great. So the Action Center here in Manchester.
I just wanted to build on what you said, because I grew up in Manchester and was getting a little scared as I walked by West High, and then I was thinking, now I'm ancient, that this center wasn't here all those years ago. So being in here and it's beautiful, I just wanted to say that I agree totally with what you said.
Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? What's really working well that you've seen?
My comment is that we don't know what's working well.
Okay.
And I don't know why I don't know. I can tell you my caregiving for my mother has passed a year and a half ago. But during the time that I was doing that, I had no idea where I was going to find anything. So I started going to things like this and collecting pamphlets, but I really think I needed more. I mean, I'm a former teacher, so I know how to read and gather information and all that kind of stuff. But you don't look for that until you need it, and then it's too late.
Yeah, that's been brought up by a few different listening sessions that we've been at, where people have talked about, you know, how do we be more prepared and how do we plan more in the future instead of being so reactive, and it's always in that point of crisis where people tend to get the support that they need and they don't feel like that should be necessary. It's really how do we plan for as we get older and deal with the things that we potentially could be facing as older adults. Absolutely.
That brings up That's a very good point. Because while I now live in an extension to my daughter's house, in a couple of years, they're going to be retiring and wanting to go somewhere alone, without me. And then where do I begin to look for a place to live? And do I have to put applications in now for that to come?
I think as you think about those type of questions, absolutely. And there's a couple different places you can go. You can go to a ServiceLink office and really talk with them. ServiceLink is one of our information and resource center services that are available across the state. And there's one here in Manchester that's located right inside one of the Easter Seals buildings here in Manchester. And you can even call them as well. And if you have my business card, you can reach out to me and I can provide you some contact information or.
And we have the brochures.
Yep, oh, okay, yep, and we have the service link brochures. Feel free to give them a call. There's a there's a 1-866 number that you can call and,
Lou comes to the center, so I can give her that information.
oh, all right, perfect.
And we-
Yeah, and really just start that conversation with them, and they'll talk to you. They're about building relationships and really talking about what your needs are, and they don't have to be right now needs. They can be future needs. That way you can get those answers of, when do I have to submit my application for housing, if that's something I need to do in the future? What's generally the time frame to get that type of resource and support for yourself? So any type of questions like that, you can go to Service Link and ask them for that.
Well, I can still get around, still able to drive and go to all the places in my community that I choose to. And what's working well is I just feel part of my community. I don't feel as though someone will look at me and say, oh, you're this or that. But I do know that this could be an issue of ageism and what people think of you when they look at you. And again, I'm still able to get around, so that is
That's a big part of that, yep.
Thank you. Sorry.
Congratulations.
Work out.
I think one of the most significant problems is communication. And how do we communicate from the state level to the community level to the local level? There's got to be a link. Now, I know there's Service Link, we fund Service Link in the budget process, and the 800 number, and Service Link is good, but indeed, it always leaves you wanting more. And there should be an end game, and communication is the key.
I'm happy you shared that because I share very similar feelings about that. As a state employee for over 20 years, I think the biggest challenge I've ever seen is the fact that although we get money for programs both at the federal and state levels, we don't get the funding to advertise and promote and really get the word out about a lot of our programs. So I agree.
And at the state level, we fund programs that never get implemented.
Yeah.
And I know that when I chaired the Finance Committee, I funded a number of programs that never got implemented. And both of them had to do with elderly and adult services. Now, the rationale was because of the COVID, we couldn't do it. But I put millions of dollars there to be spent to improve the situation that we didn't spend. That's a real problem. And I don't want to see that going forward.
And Mr. Delasoto, how long have you been in the political arena that you've seen?
I've been in the political,
Just to give you some background.
I've been in the political arena for 50 years. I first was elected in 1972.
So it's not that you, I just want to give people an idea in case they aren't familiar with you, that you've seen things. You might have.
And I've lived in the same house for 51 years on the west side of Manchester off of Boynton Street. So I love the community, and we're going to stay in the community. We're going to die in the community. But I think that the fact of the matter is, if more information were available to people, we could all have better lives.
Absolutely. And thank you for your own years of service as well. We greatly appreciate that.
I just want to say that a lot of times, because I work in social services, and a lot of times I see that programs cannot take place because of the rates that are being paid to direct care workers, whether it's for the developmentally disabled individuals, or it is people that are in the Choices for Independence programs. Their programs are there, the people are putting in their requests for the needs, but unfortunately, we just don't pay the workers enough. I mean, I see people that are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. And unfortunately, because we know right now the cost of services are even higher, I think it's gonna get worse. The other thing I would like to see a little bit better improved within my community as well as the state of New Hampshire is better transportation.
Thank you for that, and I agree, that's one thing that, you know, as inflation has impacted the workforce, we see that challenge, especially in the private, in the nonprofit sector, where, you know, especially if you're competing in home health services and you have the private agencies that can pay their staff more, you know, our nonprofit agencies that provide these social services are the ones that really are suffering, really challenged with trying to establish a workforce to meet the need. Because like you said, people spend a lot of time going through the Medicare, Medicaid application process, and then when they finally get through it, they don't have the people and the individuals to provide the service to them. So it's a huge challenge. Thank you.
Definitely want to echo what Marion said, that the availability of the home care providers, certainly they're not paid well, so that unfortunately many people are not taking those types of positions. But I will work with Adult Protective often to try and get a care provider in the home. They'll get approved for a certain amount of hours, but there are no staff to actually fill those positions. So I think funding is going to be a big help with that. And certainly always transportation, that is a major issue. People are not able to get to social programs, let alone their doctor's appointments. So that's very important that we are working on that. Transparency, I work for the Manchester Health Department. I deal often with individuals who might have challenges in the home, whether it's caring for themselves, keeping up with cleaning and other tasks. So also we will get to a position perhaps with Adult Protective where now it's unsafe for them to be in the home. So funds to help, because the client may not be able to complete such tasks, whether it's a mental health issue, ambulatory issue. So funding to help for certain types of repairs or upgrades to the home. I know I was mentioning with Tina, there are hopefully some funds coming for that, fingers crossed, but I think that's an important fund that we're going to have to look at. So if we want individuals to be able to age safely in their home, what types of repairs and upgrades can we make to ensure that happens?
Yep.
But also if there's a more imminent issue that we need to address, then having the funds to help them do so, or bodies.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Maybe ideally, so they don't get to that point.
Exactly, yes. Prevention is number one, but now unfortunately when we're in crisis mode, then it's a uh-oh.
Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Heidi, and I work for Granite State Independent Living. I am the coordinator currently, and I'm still new in the position, but it's nice to have others here. The BSEA is really my way out, at least so far, with a number of the clients I have served. So we have used that on a number of situations because I have no other choices. There doesn't seem to be a lot of opportunity and choices for the clients who are labeled in a mental health situation. So the deaf community, now I'm speaking of deaf and hard of hearing folks in the senior citizenry, so we do not want to be labeled mental health issues. So Granite State has been very creative in how we have worked with those consumers, especially those who need case management. And so we have been using the BEAS as a starter for us. And so we've managed to gather folks from different agencies to help us. The help is critical, the need is great, and it's very close to what has been working, what needs to continue working, but there still seems to be a gap between what family members of the older adults are feeling like. Now they have to become a cop, and I have to call BEA when mom is in blah, 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 and my brother's not going to wherever, and he's not taking his meds. It's sort of like the idea of trying to recognize other services and how those services have been able to be used going through the BEA. And it does walk a fine line, and it is only a short-term fix, but for the deaf and hard of hearing senior citizenry that we serve, we still do not have case management. And that's one of the biggest issues. And so where is it that they go and get the services they need?
Thank you so much for that. I mean, that has been identified at mostly all of our listening sessions as a need is really that transitional case management, you know, from a nursing home back into the community, from a short-term stay back into the community, and really making that transition work a lot easier and more well-coordinated amongst the different providers that support those individuals.
I want to take a minute to give a shout out to the Easter Seals bus. I was looking for transportation for my mother in the wheelchair. I had to dig through lots of internet to find out that it was a service that was available to me. So I want to make sure that everybody knows you can call Easter Seals. The shortcoming is it's not available on weekends. And there's a period of time during the day that you can have them. I want to say something like 10 to 1 because the buses are used. But anyway, it's a positive note. It was a really big deal for me to have the Easter Sealed bus. On the flip side, if I wanted to take my mother somewhere for weekend gatherings at a family or something like that, there was no transportation for that. But I did, we were able to pay for it, but you can rent a wheelchair accessible van. I think it's called Rideway, and it's out in Londonderry. It made all the difference in the world, but it was $250 to take her to a family party on the weekends. The other shout out is, I think Granite State Independent Living has what I found, and my mother had money, not rich, but enough to pay for a caregiver, but you want to follow the rules and not have an in-home service worker and not be paying taxes. They had a payroll program that I found, and I was able to pay my niece from my mother's money through that program. So I just wanted, as I was sitting here listening to some of you, they were positive things that were working in the community. So
That's great. Did you hear that, Lori? Lori's one of the executive directors at Easter Seals, so.
Hi, I'll throw out some comments, and
Sure.
they'll sort of blend into both questions.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
even number 3 question of ideas for what to do more of.
Okay.
First off, I'm recently 60, so I'm entering this age, you know, of elder. I guess I've been there since I was 50, and part of that is part of my dilemma, I guess, is what is the standard of elder and senior, and you know, all the different programs have different ages, and Medicare and Social Security. So my whole point of being here today is from awareness. So I would say that's what's working well, the awareness of having this kind of forum to get, you know, newer elders into the, you know, awareness of what's available. So this is terrific from that perspective. Also, I live in Litchfield. We don't have a senior center, so a senior center, I know that's not a requisite of every town and whatnot, but I'm also coming into that, you know, finding resources at neighboring town cities, you know, like this one in Manchester, the one in Nashua, you know, Hudson, other surrounding communities to where I can find resources. So I think that has to do with communication and, again, awareness. So I think just the communication of all the different entities out there to get, you know, elders engaged is great. And so I guess that would be my suggestion then, or or just to better serve is to continue the awareness and the communications that you guys do, as well as the other supporting groups that, you know, support older Americans.
No, I agree with you, right? And I love the idea of that, and really getting us back out into the community to engage in these type of forums is something I think is critically important. It shouldn't just happen the once every 4 years we have to do a state plan. It should happen more frequently than that.
Right.
So thank you.
Hi, Thanks so much for hosting this. I think, and maybe this happened, but I'm not sure, but just partnering with businesses to understand how to help older clients that they might have. I mean, just today walking into the doors here, the handicap buttons didn't work. I had to help some folks get in, and that's like a big major thing where, yeah, they understand that those things, but making sure that they're working, that there's more accessibility, or just a much easier way for folks to come in. It will only help people feel more comfortable, but help the economy-wise, so that folks do feel safer and able to participate or go to these stores and feel like they can age in their community, which also goes to stand of city planning, town planning, making sure that those small things are there, you know, when it comes to even ADA accessibility. So partnering with perhaps chambers, you know, in local areas to help disseminate and do those trainings to really get the message out, like, hey, this is an economic driver, and showing the cost benefit for businesses, and it's not going to necessarily take funding from you all, but just that better collaboration of getting the information out. Maybe of use if it's not done in such a succinct way. Thanks.
I think that's a great idea. I think the state engaging with the local, like you said, city council or the chamber in the city, just to get that awareness, because you're right, a lot of local businesses are part of the city chamber or town or whatever the case may be, and it is a great way to disseminate information. So thank you for sharing that.
One of the things that I'm noticing as I near closer to retirement is that our society isn't built for universal design and accessibility of different things. So that even new homes that are being built aren't designed for growing older and weaker and, you know, more vulnerable. So I'd like to see improvements in talking to the game players, the builders, and even in public transportation, to make the buses more accessible, to make the other forms of transportation easier to get into, and yeah, just see more universal design throughout the community even.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having this session, and I think I'm just building on what folks have said about communication, and wonderful to really hear what's impacting people and then understanding different perspectives. So I also should do a disclosure that, well, my name's Judith Jones and I'm from New Hampshire Legal Assistance, and have done work in the field of elder law. Let me just say that I'm elderly now. And a shout out to anybody on Boynton Street, because I grew up on Milford Street. So, I have some few tangible suggestions, and one is streamlining some of the Medicaid application process, and also the food stamp application process, and just a thought of the EAS working closely with BFA, and that some of the things that BEAS sees and maybe could be minimized through a dialogue with BFA, the Bureau of Financial Assistance, it's all a load of acronyms, sorry, and looking at and it's understanding what pressures are each department, what are the pressures each department is under, what's a federal pressure, what's a state pressure, and even understanding what are those pressures, where is their legal way to be maybe a little bit easier. So one thing is just the food insecurity, knowing that the medical deduction for food stamps may free up a lot of people to get food stamps. So that was just one thing. And I thought I'd just use the time to share a little bit about some of what I'm hearing. I've done a lot of listening in New Hampshire, and think that in the past 20 years, some of the problems we've seen now look quaint compared to just that we're all under pressures, we're all under challenges. But one thing that we're seeing a lot of is really hoping there can be a focus on housing stability and an increase in Medicaid waiver programs that maybe coordinate with supported housing. And how do we increase supported housing in New Hampshire and services in housing? And then even now, some creative thinking about hospitals really having a hard time with folks being in the hospital when they don't need services, but there's no place to put them because they can't go home. Can we learn from other communities about shelters? Maybe a shelter that could take folks who have some medical issues, where there could be respite maybe for elderly folks. So just looking at these problems are here. We're not, I think we've hit the iceberg, and could we be a little more prepared and even looking at what other communities are doing? So some things in Portland, Maine that are happening with shelters. So it is just looking a little bit to the future, and mostly how can we learn and listen to each other. And I do think some of the ideas really come from listening hard. So I do appreciate this session, and I'd come to each one. So.
Thank you for that, I appreciate it.
So listening to all of this too, and I applaud the idea of having a universal design for new construction, but I think also there should be some way that there's money available, that homes as well as businesses, there can be more accessible. For instance, just a little stoop sometimes can be detrimental to somebody who's in a wheelchair or who has a walker. So modifying, being able to modify a business entrance, or even being able to modify your home so that you can live in place in that home would be welcome. It'd be also looking towards long-term care support services for people as they age, not just say, hey, you're elderly, you cannot do certain things, you should be in a nursing home, because there are other alternatives. And the thing I would say in Manchester, there are some sidewalks that do need to be repaired, because they are really bad.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, we did a listening session up in Berlin, and when we asked the first question, what's working well, one of the residents there talked about the fact that their city hall, I believe, had heated sidewalks. Which I'm like, wow, that's a great technology, but as you can imagine, I would imagine it's pretty expensive to have that technology, but think about that as far as people who have to walk to certain areas and walk for services, to be able to have those heated sidewalks to keep them clear at all times is important. So yeah, access. And one thing I will say is during the pandemic, we did get some federal funding to help expand some of our programs. And one of our programs we expanded for our caregiver program, as well as our adult protection program, is a home modification program. And what we had before was, the only way I can describe it was somewhat laughable, is we had a home modification ability to do it with Older Americans Act funding, but in the regulation, it had a federal regulation. It's a federal regulation. $150 per individual per lifetime. So as you can imagine, you may be able to get a handrail put up in your bathroom or something with that type of money. So we actually wrote a waiver to our federal partners to expand that program, and we got it approved. So now we can go up to $5,000. In some extreme cases, we can go to $10,000, but we have to get permission for that. But so if there are caregiver needs for those home modifications, whether it be a ramp, things that we thought about is when people need to transition from a bathtub into a walk-in shower, something like that, that these funds can be used to help support those individuals and help keep them at home to better serve them that way.
And the way And the way it's written, it's not just home modifications, it's home modifications and repairs, because as we talked about, and I know right now, this is a pilot, that's why it's only covering 2 small populations. And the hope is that we might be able to show how helpful this is and help it where there's no housing. If we can just do this little thing, which for one person, it's a big thing, but for the state of New Hampshire, it's really a little thing compared to an institutionalization, which is probably on average like $100,000 a year. But I've gotten, actually now 3 calls for a furnace. The average cost was $5,500, but no heat. They can manage if they just get this new furnace, $5,500. Their house will be condemned, they'll be homeless. Or I can get this furnace replaced and they can live happily ever after because they can manage otherwise. So to me, it seems like a no-brainer. Their pipes will burst, there'll be this whole snowball effect. So to me, I think it's very obvious. I'm just trying to collect data with my supervisor and provide to Tom so he can provide to those that need to see it so we can maybe get some funding down the road and advocate.
That's the challenge of it, is that it is a pandemic response grant that we got from the feds, which is only good until the end of September of '24. So once that grant ends, our ability to have the funding to support the program goes away. So again, this is part of our process of looking internally to say, all right, let's look at our budget. You know, are we maximizing our services? Or do we have areas where maybe we're not using as much funding that we can shift over to our home modification program to continue to support that program? So those are some of the internal discussions that we have at BEAS about how to continue our services, even when we try to build new programs.
Excuse me, the other item that I think can be challenging at times is meeting individuals where they're at, certainly physically, but also in their capabilities, especially when we ask individuals to fill out forms or navigate a system that it's their first interaction with, so they're really not as savvy as we would hope or expect them to be. So whether that looks like more community events, so embedding into the community so people can come and engage.
Yep.
Of course, we would love to teach, as we have an aging our newer aging population is more tech savvy, so they're going to be able to go online, but we certainly do have the current population who has much more difficulty navigating through the forms, and you look at a website, even if you get on there, it's pretty buried and antiquated and not as easy. So I think making our communication strategies just much more transparent, easy to go through, and so whether those more embedding right into the community so that people can actually access those.
Yeah, it kind of builds on what was said earlier about the communication piece. Like, how do you get the information out there to the general public to help promote this? Because ServiceLink was a big key in helping with some of that work before. They used to be able to go out into the community and sit with individuals and do the application work with them. But our workforce has been so impacted by the pandemic and the cost of living going up, and we've lost so much staff that we've had to pull back a little bit. And yes, we do in extreme cases still go out and try to do those home visits to help support that application process. But the need is so much greater in those extreme cases. Like, it's needed much more. So there's a current, it's House Bill or Senate Bill 36 that's out there right now. That's gonna, hopefully if it gets passed, will help expand ServiceLink a little bit more to be able to do that type of work. Because if anything, I think that's what we hear at the Bureau most, is we need people out in the community to help us engage in the process. And
For sure, thank you.
Yep.
I don't want the mic. Regarding communication as well, it seems to be reoccurring. But for example, for senior citizens in particularly, they don't like the label of having any kind of hearing loss. It's denial, right? We can all understand that. So we need to be cognizant of those kind of labels, because once they get offended, maybe, they become resistant. So we don't want to use that label hearing loss. I find that to be a big issue. And at Granite State Independent Living, sometimes we're stuck. And I'm trying again to be more creative with DHHS. I work with Joan. We work together sometimes. So we're actually working on this. Kind of a friendly voice, friendly language, friendly approach. So consumers who are getting to be that age and they're losing their hearing, how do we make this process better for them? And the second thing is the survey. I see the survey, this looks great so far. But one thing concerns me is who is going to provide ASL interpretation for deaf and hard of hearing individuals to be able to fill out the survey. So that's just one example of barriers. It's not available for people who English isn't their first language, which are ASL users primarily. And also, I'm not sure, but I don't think I saw, I think it's important when we have meetings to actually add some kind of disclaimer. I think we did for this and it was great, but the different things we have for accessibility, ASL interpreters, CART, to let our community members know that whatever they need is available. And I think that if we could parallel that with this survey, like if you need an accommodation to be able to fill out this survey, whether it be American Sign Language or whatever the case may be, that needs to be put out there as well.
Great, thank you. That's a very important message.
Thank you, Heidi. We've only met via emails, but so it's nice to have a face-to-face introduction with you. And so what you said is leading me to what I wanted to say about universal design, because so often people think physical access or maybe vision access, but we need to think about people who have needs for hearing access and also speech access in different facilities and programs. And so I've been advocating for for example, this place, using the senior center, using microphones all the time, because that way someone doesn't have to say, I'm having a bad ear day, I can't hear Tom, but maybe I hear Tina, and then, okay, I'm just gonna fall asleep instead of listening to what's been going on. And so microphones could be a standard practice of using them for every activity, whether it's bingo or announcing what the meals are for the day. The other thing is technology is evolving so much that it's not such a challenge to be able to provide access. For example, we today have Denise, but Denise is one of the few CAR reporters, by the way, who is doing captioning, and in certain places like bingo here or senior centers, you can use your cell phone, have an app, have it connected to a projector, and everything you're saying in the senior center will be projected for your consumers, your residents, your participants to be able to read. And so NAL Scribe is one that teachers of the deaf are using in the school system. There's Otter on iPhones and Live Transcribe on Androids that are free. And so we can promote access in different scenarios. The other thing is, I've been with BAS, I was able to get some funding to provide each of the BAS staff workers a ADA kit, which has a pocket talker, a dome magnifier, a whiteboard, and a picture board. I have been trying to encourage providers out there to do the same. And it's always like, oh, we don't have the funds. Well, you know what? That's not an excuse anymore. We need to be provided access. My hearing aids die as I'm going in to see you, Tom. I would like you to provide me the pocket talker. And then if Heidi goes in to see you, you pull out the video relay interpreter on the iPad.
Yeah.
So access is more commonly available now than 10 years ago. And then speech access. There are apps for people who can't speak. They can tap on the Clarocom Pro, you own a bakery, I type on it and tap on it, and I want I want an espresso, I tap that sentence and it will voice for me. So there are a lot of solutions out there, and I think we need to be open-minded about getting them and paying for them so that we can promote universal acceptance and access to services. Okay.
Thank you, Joan, it's very important.
Another thing that I'm finding out there is that sometimes the qualification, what makes you qualify for assistance, is a poverty level that is so low that the person who's making it on their fixed income can't make it when unexpected costs come in. For instance, a friend of mine found that she couldn't fill up her oil tank this year because the cost of heating was so high, but she didn't qualify for the fuel assistance program because she made too much money. So I would like to see, that raised, because everyday persons, like someone was saying, just a little thing can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Having more of an ability to have that sliding fee scale. Any other thoughts? We can go to question 3, I think.
How about question 4?
Yeah. Oh, sure. We've been talking a little bit between questions 1, 2, and 3, so I'm absolutely happy with question 4, which is, what do you need to continue living in your home as you get older? What are some things that you've identified that you feel like you need, or that you've experienced others have needed as they get older in their home?
Yeah, it's the whole reason I came to this. I think you're going to find that senior citizens have a home, and they want to stay in it. But things change, and unless they have family, and as you said, you had to move closer to your family because you don't need much, you just need somebody to pay attention. So I'm here because of this question. I went to listening sessions a few years back because of this question. During my seniors elderly care research, I came across a pilot program, and that word pilot bothers me. It was perfect. It was the perfect answer. I saw it in a church bulletin at St. Catherine's, and I couldn't find out who piloted it. And I think I came to the conclusion that it was the Moore Center. And it was for having somebody live in your home rent-free in exchange. They weren't caretakers 24/7. They just were roommates in your home rent-free, but they were there, so somebody was there if you were on the floor or could answer the phone or something like that. I'm here to advocate for that. I think it would be the #1 thing that would allow seniors to stay in their home. I will tell you that I understand the vetting process is what stopped me. I want the services of the government, be it state or federal, to do the background checks on these people, to have a whole list of people who qualify as honest and caring, etc., so that I wouldn't be afraid to put them in my home that they're going to steal or anything like that. But it's too big of a job for a consumer to do. And so on a federal level or a state level, and I know that there's a lot of liability involved in that, and if something goes wrong, you're going to get sued and all that, but you're going to solve a housing problem for people, because as you've all said, the caregiving personality doesn't earn a whole lot of money because they have that caregiving personality, but they can't afford their apartments. So I can't, advocate enough that I think this was going to solve a lot of things. Not overnight, but I talked about it 3 years ago. So I'm anxious to see whether it even made it to your last 4-year program. And I'm passionate enough about it, I hate to say this out loud, but I would get involved. I lived it. My mother had her own home. My sister and I and a neighbor took turns being in the house. My sister and I took turns sleeping overnight, and the neighbor, and we also had caregivers who came in, because not that she didn't need much, but she couldn't be trusted to walk to the bathroom without falling down. So that's where my head is.
No, I think that's a great recommendation. I know that we heard this from another listening session, that Vermont has it's called a shared housing program.
Yes.
And it's essentially just like that, where you have older adults who decide to live together in a home, whether it be one adult's home or the other, and share that responsibility of cohabitating and living together and supporting one another. Again, it's something I'm definitely going to plan on
New
looking
Hampshire
into.
had it for 1 year. I mean, I actually heard a podcast, and I put a lot of time into digging through it. We had it. It was 1 year, and hopefully you'll dig through, and I kept all that stuff, so.
Well, if you have any information,
We'll
feel
find
free to
it.
grab my business card before you go.
Okay.
And
New
share
Hampshire
that.
had where an older adult could live, sorry, I
Oh,
need
sorry.
to use my phone. What I remember, because I'm sorry, I get very passionate. So I appreciate, I used to work in adult protection, and I used this program a few times. What the Moore Center had collaborated with the Bureau was they had a program, they called it Kinship, and I think there's still something like this, but it was based off the Bureau of Developmental Services program. So it's not exactly what you're discussing, but a family could have an older adult live with them. And I had utilized that before when I worked. So they would, the families that I had met, one had a child who was on the spectrum, so she didn't want to work. She couldn't work. She didn't feel, she wanted to stay at home and provide some extra support to her child. And she was willing to take someone in, because she had done that before with someone that had a disability. So she'd take this older adult in. So, and it worked well. They got along really well. So that the Moore Center had collaborated with the Bureau on that. So that's the only program I'm familiar with. It wasn't, I don't know that anything else. I know there was something that the Bureau was trying to work on. They were trying to develop something else. But that
one was for disability people, it
No.
wasn't for seniors.
It was for seniors. Yes, and it was called Kinship. So it was under Medicaid. It was paid for by Medicaid.
I'll dig through my little bag and see what I can do.
So to clarify, so which bureau, you mentioned the bureau, which bureau?
I'm so sorry. The Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services collaborated with the Bureau of Developmental Services. I'm sorry. And one other point I wanted to bring up, I have read a lot of research. This is in European countries. They've done some intergenerational programs to help with college students. So college students, this is usually short term though, like 1 to 4 years, so they help with college housing. So this would only probably help in towns that have colleges, I realize. But an older adult that has an extra room, and this would be, again, organized by an organization or a government agency. But they open up their room so the student would get some discounted housing, but would help out around the house. And I think that research looks really promising, but again, the front end of it is a lot of work and some funding. But I think the intergenerational piece is really great because you have the social aspect, and there was a lot of great reviews.
This pertains more to question 3, but I just wanted to say that the state should continue to support and collaborate with local and regional organizations like the Alliance for Healthy Aging, and being a part of spaces like the State Coordinating Council and regional coordinating councils to continue to explore funding opportunities from the federal government and through the state's programming opportunities. So I applaud the state for doing that, but I think there's always opportunities to expand on it.
Thank you for that. Those are critical connections, I think, for at least at the Bureau of Health and Adult Services, and it has led to great outcomes. One I can think of is we did partner with some of the regional councils to develop through a grant with Jennifer and the Bureau to help promote more of the volunteer driver program and to reestablish that base because it was really decimated during the pandemic. We're still struggling, I think, to kind of build that service network back up again, but it's through the partnerships and conversations and ways that we can leverage each other's, strengths that we have to help build that back up again. So yeah, that's critically important.
Hi, I want to sort of build off of what you were speaking about having younger people, and I think just in general working with or partnering and looking at, we're focusing on, of course, on older adults here, but looking how we can educate younger people to understand. I'm going to guess that there aren't that many younger people in the audience or that have spoken up and understand that this is happening, because we know it's just not in an interest and it's not being brought up. But in a state like New Hampshire, I think it's really important that younger people understand the demographics of their state. So finding means to help educate people at that level, doing it in perhaps a way of workforce development, of getting them encouraged to these different career paths, explaining what's available, and doing it at probably like a high school level, other youth groups that there are, like drug-free community groups, things like that, volunteer groups, other action places that could help. I think just making sure that they understand, what's it like for their neighbors, because they probably just don't have a sense of it, and no one will tell them, and they'll just look around, and just being able to have that understanding, I think, will be more beneficial for folks all around.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I've shared this at other listening sessions. I remember there used to be a workforce group that got together, and I want to say it was in the Conway area, to really talk about that. How do we engage our high schools and our younger population in New Hampshire to really make them, one, aware of the needs of the older adults in New Hampshire, as well as opportunities, because most kids who are graduating high school have their requirement for community service. How do we get involved in that? And one thing that's happened in New Hampshire is we have a adult day program that's actually was built and is part of Alvern High School, which is over in the Wyndham area. And
Hudson.
It's been great. What's that?
Hudson.
Hudson area. And it's been really wonderful to watch because the high schoolers who want to be a part of that program just come right in. They get credit for being there and volunteering and helping at the program, and that to me is what really once they experience it and really work with that population is where you're going to get that drive to want to continue that and maybe hopefully into your college career moving forward. So that's it. We're here.
Another thing I was thinking of, and it's not about continuing to live in my own home, although that is, I guess, in the long run, is the whole concept of ageism and the negative perspective of adults staying independent and maintaining their identity in their communities and so forth. is helping to change the society, that we welcome the wisdom of those who've aged and the insights that they've gained and so forth, and not say we got to leave it to the younger generation to take care of this. Is tap into the wisdom and engage older adults in their experience as valuable to moving forward as a world.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, this is related more to question 3.
Okay.
Which is,
Yes.
so
Is how can we better serve and support aging populations today and in the future?
I think we're on the trajectory, but I do want to speak about what's personal to me, is the understanding of demographics and what we need to do to change. I'm a healthcare provider, a dental hygienist, public health dental hygienist. And so I started an agency to bring services to the homebound. And what I have learned over that time, over the last 8 years, including the pandemic, is that not only am I capacity challenged, but my whole industry is capacity challenged. And of course, we just now are starting with the adult Medicaid dental benefit. But I'd like to see the plan include the advancement for interprofessional care on a therapeutic level. In my instance, it's preventive care and stabilizing care, but we have real challenges when we get to the frail elder, which is our fastest growing population, who did not have access for 20 years. So I would really like to see the partnerships with the University of New Hampshire, the the new University of New Hampshire partnership with, for the professions, which is UNH Manchester and Granite State College, to do a degree completion program for my discipline, and also look at more pilot programs and research programs that can be done so that we improve the oral health of our elder population.
Thank you for that. Way in the back. Yep.
We all have our teeth now, by the way. We're all aging with our natural teeth, which is a very different caregiving situation.
Hi, my name is Christy St. Laurent, and I do serve on the Commission on Aging. And when we were the Committee on Aging, we came together to help a woman who was losing her housing. Her house was being foreclosed on. I helped her fill out a lot of the applications people are talking about, and they were onerous for me to figure out. Not only that, I was basically a stranger to her, and she had to give me copies of her bank statements, her taxes, her birth certificate, her driver's license. And she also had questions about, well, isn't this all the stuff I'm not supposed to turn over to people? I think she trusted me okay, but to her point, some of these were paper applications, paper copies that she's giving to town housing authorities trying to find affordable housing. And she said, where do they go? They're sitting in a box in the bottom of town hall for how many years? And it's 2 to 5 years, 6 years, 7 years before I might get someplace. Where did all those papers go with all of my information? I think one thing that the state could do, and I would ask legal services and DHHS and the housing authority to come up with one application, one entry point for that information that the applicants know is secure, because all of these different housing projects and housing authorities, each of them has a different application. One, I had to drive across the state to pick up a physical application, bring it back to her to fill out and drive it back to them. They wouldn't accept anything by mail. Just that was crazy. So, but I think one central location to submit, and then the different
entities providing the housing or providing services, if they're only trying to serve people below a certain threshold of income or certain resources, private information, that they could get that certification from the state, that clarification from the state or whoever, whatever entity holds that information. But I think just one point for people to have to submit all of that would be much better. And her other question was, if I submit now, I get accepted in 5 years, they're gonna want all of my bank statements again then anyway, so why do I have to give them all now? It's a very difficult situation, it's very invasive, and it's very difficult to do over and over and over again for all of the different places you need to apply in order to try to get lucky and get somewhere to live or to get the services that you need.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think being able to do that and streamlining the application processes is critical because it's overwhelming. You know, I always share the story. I'm someone who's worked with the state for 20 years, and before coming to BEAS, my mother-in-law needed to apply for long-term care Medicaid, and that process was, even with 15 years in state service, I wasn't even sure of everything I needed to provide, whether or not I was going in the right direction. I didn't even know about ServiceLink at the time, so we talked about communication. I was a department staff for 15 years and had no idea ServiceLink was a department program. So it was a huge learning curve for me, and I have state service and good experience and work in social services. I can't imagine for the people that don't have that experience and don't have those resources available to them. So that's a great point. Thank you.
I just have one word clarification. When you were talking about, the different documents related to what needed to be supplied, I agree with you, for sure. And statewide, I think they have a system, a portal, like a portal system. And that would be fantastic. Where a person or an agency or a case manager can upload everything, make copies. That, I just echo what she has to say. That needs to happen.
Great. Thank you. Any other thoughts? And again, it can be on any question, whether what we're doing good, what's not going well, what we can do to better serve. Anything on what we need to continue living in our homes.
Someone to cut the grass, someone to buy the groceries.
That's a legitimate point, absolutely.
A handyman to, I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say it, but that's I'm working on that right now for myself. I still cut the grass, but, it's a team, a landscaper and a handyman and a plumber and an electrician that you can trust and that you can call on. I've often made the comment about having a personal Uber driver. So, I don't know if that even exists, but when you're on your own or you don't have a car anymore or you're not driving, you want to be able to call, like a taxi cab, but a personal Uber driver to me just seems like the fix for that. We know we're going to have to pay for things as we age. And you're either going to give $9,000 or $13,000 a year, a month rather, to a nursing home because you have money in the bank, or you're going to use that money to pay for personal services at your house. But again, I go back to my first comment when I first got here at noontime. Where do you find what you need?
Yep. Fair question. And a very important point too. That's been discussed in every type of listening session we've had, is there's needs for those smaller chore type things to get done around the house and support around that. So yeah.
That brings up something for me to think about. Those of us that might not qualify for some of the financial programs that the state has, but that the concept of buying down all of your assets until you can. Now, I'm not sure that's a really smart thing to do or think about. So, so I was thinking, about myself and my husband, who are elders now and still working, but the process of planning ahead, so that becomes something that we can influence in our state, not have our elders go to the point of poverty. Like, how can we prevent us from going to the point of poverty when we need all these services and they cost money? So, some other type of way to think about those of us that still have financial resources, but we don't want to burden the state also when we've given up every asset we have. And you are right, assisted living is very, very costly.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that. Other thoughts? Okay, I think we can probably move on to question 5. So what can we do to reduce social isolation for older adults in New Hampshire? Again, something that's critically important since isolation for older adults has become a major issue in our state since the pandemic.
It used to be, we had a adopted grandparent program years ago, and it disappeared somewhere. But I thought that was a good program. And I was also thinking that communities, neighborhoods, can be on, have a program to look out for your neighbor kind of thing. But there's so many of our elderly who are living in the inner city where the neighborhood has changed and it's not a safe place to develop those kinds of relationships.
Yeah, it's very true. It's funny. I have some older people that live on my street, and I'm amazed that our street is packed with people. And there's only me and one other person who checks in on the individual on a regular basis, especially, I think about what's coming this Friday and Saturday with the extreme cold temperatures, I plan on going to her home and just visiting with her and saying hello and making sure she's all set or she doesn't need anything, but that type of stuff seems to have really gone to the wayside as we've gotten older in our state. And I don't know if it's technology is the reason why or what the cause is for that, but no, I agree. I think the more we can do that, the better everyone will be.
I don't think I caught, what was the second thing you said?
What was what?
What was the second thing she said? Did I catch?
Did you hear the
I talked
adopted
about
grandparent?
adopted grandparent program, and I also talked about neighborhoods themselves, except only safe neighborhoods. Checking in on their elderly.
Yep.
And just trying to stay in touch, especially people who are living alone, no matter how old they are.
So I'm going to go back to transportation because we need better public transportation. I know that in Manchester, the bus routes are determined by the amount of ridership that they have. But people, just because you're older doesn't mean that you're going to sit at home and watch TV all day or do puzzles. We don't want that. We want to go out. We want to socialize. When you have to give up your car, that's a hard thing for someone who doesn't have relatives or a support system to get them where they want to go. Yes, it's important that they get to their doctor's appointments and they get their groceries done, but it's also important that they interact with other people. That's what keeps you going and makes you feel like, you're alive. And the other thing is safety. You're right, there are a lot of older neighborhoods, but you need to feel safe in your home, you need to feel safe in your neighborhood so that you could take a walk around the block with a friend or just by yourself to get some fresh air. We just need to make things more accessible for people as they get older, not say, well, now you're a certain age, and so you should be content to just be staying at home. We need to change that attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will help us live longer, actually.
I was waiting till we got to number 5. I'm from Manchester. I'm a local person. I'm recently in the Medicare world, and I'm retired. I do a lot of walking. And I do a lot of walking, trying not to be on those sidewalks that need repairs. Lucky enough to find a few parks in Manchester that have nice paved, like, pathways in the park where you can walk around. And I often think that, you know, I don't want to walk by myself, the safety issue, you know. But and I was kind of hoping maybe Parks and Rec could have been involved in this meeting, or somebody from that area. All towns have Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
But, you know, we do want to do something social. We want to do something productive. And even to have Parks and Rec post or advertise for group cleanup, you know, during the day. I mean, kids are in school, but it's a chance for retired people to go for walks along a rail trail or paved parkway or something, pick up trash, and you're with a group of people that are caring about the environment, have something to work towards together, and it just promotes, you know, people picking up friendships and being social, getting the exercise in, and being outside too. I mean, it doesn't help people that have to stay inside, but for the people that are active and want to be outside and want to feel like they've done something. And to that, I'm going to say that I often go for walks, like around Memorial High School, on rail trails, and I'm picking up trash, and I'm picking up a lot of recycled stuff, which breaks my heart to have to put into the regular trash because there's no recycle bins there too. But I'm just saying that kind of activity could help a lot of people, but you would also need to have that communication, that advertising, like, oh, anybody interested in going to pick up in a certain area at Derryfield Park, or, you know, around a school, or we do have Adopt a Block in April, but once a year is really not, for what this city has for trash, that's not enough. But it's something that I thought could be helpful to cover a lot of
No, I think it's a great point. I think the more active we can be, regardless of what the activity is, right? But it's again, it's that communication piece.
And you know, we used
Awareness.
to have things in the summertime for kids in the park.
Yep.
You know, activities for the, I don't think we use our parks enough, and I know part of it is safety, but it also, you don't, if you're lucky enough to live near a park, you could walk there if you know, or get somebody to wheel you there.
Yep, yeah, very true.
Just to answer some of your questions, Parks and Rec does offer walking groups, and usually here at the center, when they are available, we'll have flyers available for people to take. We also post it on our website and on our Facebook page. I'm sure the rec department does as well. But there's also the senior police walks, and I know those are very well attended, especially by our folks who come here at the Cashton Senior Center. And those are offered from spring to fall, and you're walking with an officer. So it makes you feel safe. I know that a lot of, you know, these groups that group is actually fairly big. So, you know, you can feel safe going for a walk. You're with your peers, but you're also with an officer who, you know, if anything happens, will be able to help you. And I know they also, MTA also offers, it started last year, I don't know if they're gonna do it again this year, but transportation to some of the local trails. So you can get picked up, and then they'll bring you to either one of the rail trails or like Livingston. That was offered last year. I don't know if they're gonna do it again this year, but, you know, just to speak on as far as the walking and being in a group and not feeling, you know, feeling safe, and, you know, those are some options.
Thank you for sharing.
Hi, my problem is that my family all work. So during the day, if I didn't have my car, I would be one of those isolated people. So again, we go back to communication. Couldn't there be something like call a friend, make a friend, call a friend, and in an organized situation where phone numbers would be available if you wanted to leave your phone number for someone to call you, just to check on you and see what's going on. And then there's always that button, that first alert button, that didn't cost me a fortune, I think it was $170, that you can wear around your neck, and you push the button, and they don't call your family, but they will call the ambulance.
Yeah.
So there are things that keep you from total isolation, but I would like to see, you know, phone a friend or some kind of an organized situation where you can find someone to talk to.
Yeah, someone brought up, we had a comment at, I think it was, I want to say it was a Gibson Center where, actually it was in the Berlin listening session, where someone talked about a device they had, it was like a picture frame. And so when you buy the picture frame, you have the ability to download an app onto your smartphone. It doesn't cost you anything except the cost of the picture frame. But what the picture frame really is that when you hit the app on your smartphone, it'll video you onto that picture frame for an individual. Or the individual can reach out to somebody on their smartphone and have that dialogue. And so I thought it was such a unique idea that it's not super expensive, it's relatively cheap. Most people have smartphones nowadays. And so I think about it in a caregiver situation where maybe the person doesn't need 24/7 care, but the family members may want to be able to check in on the individual and see how they're doing, how their day's going. They can pop into that app, and what they'll do is they'll show up right on that digital screen, and it has a microphone to it, so it listens, and you'll be able to talk.
How do you find that app?
I can't remember exactly what it was called. I can't remember, it was like,
So you buy the picture frame, and the name of the app is the name of the picture frame.
yeah.
So say you can do it. It's kind of like an Echo or like one of those smart devices. So you buy. I forget if it's called, like, say it's called Smart Frame or something.
I think it is something frame.
Yeah, it's something frame.
Yeah,
So you buy that, and then the app's called Smart Frame.
Where do you buy the frame?
Oh, anywhere, like Amazon, Walmart, or Target.
Just look up frame?
Yeah,
Yep.
well, but it's a particular one. So even if you don't, it doesn't even have to be an emergency. It could be like you buy one for your friend. So it's kind of like, like my mom doesn't like technology. She doesn't really want to learn it. She could. She's intelligent. She just doesn't like it. She's afraid she'll break something. So I can just, but she's smart. She could if she wanted to. So I could just, instead of her having to push buttons, I could just push out the app on my phone, and then I could pop into her without her having to do anything. She doesn't have any caregiving needs per se. She's able to walk into, so it just makes things simpler. So sometimes, because you have like Skyping abilities, you have other things, but people, like my mom, she doesn't want to worry about another password. So she wants a minimum. Yeah. So that's what. So for some people, like if you have, it's nice if you have someone that's far away or just someone that you want to see, or grandchildren or whatever. So
The question is still, what is it called? How
yes,
do I get it?
if you leave me your a contact number, I'll
Yep.
get it. I'll get the name because there's someone that has a staff person or I'll give you my phone number or something.
Maybe Cashin Center would.
Oh, can I give you the? Can I?
You can give me the info, yeah, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I can email you or something, and then you can, if that's okay.
That would be something interesting to pursue.
Sorry.
So just to respond about walking, as Kim had indicated, there definitely are a lot of walking groups. Certainly, the officer just walked right by, Officer Steve Duquette, who runs a lot of those programs, so that's wonderful. I know I mentioned that I work for the Manchester Health Department. I'm also the president of our union that encompasses the Parks and Rec Department. So I can definitely get those concerns back, or, you know, are there better opportunities regarding, you know, organized cleanups or something to engage the public. I think the concern obviously would always be liability, say someone were to get stuck by a needle or hurt, but I think if you want to be very mindful or careful about that, but I think there could be some really good opportunities to engage. So whether it's like the drug take back day or hazardous waste day, I know we don't want you guys handling hazardous waste, but you know what I mean, there could be other opportunities that the city already has other programming in place, and then to engage that other portion of the community that may not be currently.
They allow that, they shouldn't.
Yeah, so I think the notion was that if Adopt a Block, if individuals are allowed to participate in Adopt a Block, then why not others? And I don't know that they couldn't. I think that just might, out of my own kind of perspective, that might be a concern, that we wouldn't want people to pick up something, get injured, and we know, unfortunately, things like that are tossed around the trails. So, you know, are there opportunities? For sure. So I'll definitely look into that.
Actually, the car reporter knew the name of what that, I'm going to let her speak.
Okay.
Can you take a break?
Because I can't actually speak at the same time. So my mom is in assisted living facility, and the way we keep an eye on her is we bought a Facebook portal, which acts like a digital frame. So she has it in her room. If we call from the app on our phone, she will see it light up on her screen, and she just swipes to answer it, and we can have a video call with her in that way. So the person gets the frame, but you have the Facebook app on your phone to call to that frame. So that's one option, that's one we use. There's probably others out there, but that was a very affordable way to have a camera or eyes on her throughout the day. If you can't get there in person, a video call makes it feel like we're in person to her.
Yeah.
She suffers from Alzheimer's, so. But it was the Facebook portal, and it's a digital frame.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the difference between the frame, the Facebook portal frame, and the frame you're talking about is you don't have to swipe to open it, so you can literally press the app, go onto it, and say, hey, Mom, are you there? You know, and that would be their cue to be, oh, my frame is on, and then you go over and see it. So, yeah. So just based on it.
I was, oops.
These are great. So I've been writing notes like crazy. So the YMCA, I think for another state agency that I know of, has a senior citizen friendly activities issues. Like there's a pickleball group, and there's a yoga group, and there's, I mean, I'm not from here specifically, but I think the YMCA is also an excellent resource for us to access. And the CFI, I think one of the things that might be related to the isolation piece that we're discussing here is that sometimes some services can overlap. And some clients can get it, some through GSIO, some through CFI. And where we often borrow the BEA startup component is it's not an often occurrence. It does not typically use the team approach or have any long-lasting standards. I mean, once the CFI component is completed, you can access the granted state component. So there is an issue related to trying to get out of the isolation component. And there's also Northeast Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services Center. They deal with a lot of senior citizen events. But it is not really hearing loss individuals. It is not for the folks who are denying their identifying hearing loss, but they also have a website, Northeast Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services, where they do have senior citizen events that occur monthly. And they do have a knitting club, which is also very nice, another separate event that occurs. And how that occurred, I think the idea of trying to create ways to avoid isolation, it was done through a grant written by DHHS. So that is also allowing greater involvement within the community. So grant writers, if you can, that's a space. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was thinking about looking at the possibility of partnershiping. So if you had, say, Meals on Wheels, and you had a social service organization that was focused on reducing isolation, could you develop some type of simple assessment tool and work together, and then go back and do the planning for how we can increase or decrease the social isolation? So working with someone that's already reaching out to the isolated, but working together in a partnershiping way to gather the information. Because some people actually, they may enjoy their isolation. There are others that they've been isolated so long that they don't know how to take that first baby step. And so I think it's something to look at.
Or getting comfortable enough to take that first baby step. Yeah, because our Meals on Wheels program, a component of that is making that face-to-face contact when you deliver the meal, which is so critically important. But even now we struggle because there's some people who just they don't even want them. Just leave my food on the step, I'll come out and get it. Have a nice day. And it's like, well, we'd like to talk to you, and it's become challenging sometimes. Yeah.
And there might be some fear, there
Oh,
might
absolutely.
be, behavioral health here involved as well, and
Yep.
social services, and, it's like a myriad of
Yeah, absolutely.
things, that you're gonna see my dirty apartment.
Yeah.
That, or you're gonna steal my personal, all of this is something that can be worked through,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
But
but it's
hard.
building that relationship to have that type of partnership. Yeah.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. I'd be remiss if I didn't speak to an industry that is really helping in the reduction of isolation, and that is adult day. There are 14 adult day programs in the state of New Hampshire, and that are underutilized right now. They took a big hit through COVID. Pre-COVID, the local adult day program here in Manchester was seeing about 180 to 200 people a week. And right now, trying to rebuild back up, we are at around 40 to 50. So we have a lot of capacity. So these are adult day programs. Industry has been around for about 40 years. The industry itself has been around for 40 years. And it's an opportunity for, certainly for respite for caregivers, a huge amount of respite for caregivers. We're looking at some programs are 7:30 to 5:30, some are 8 to 3. It's a lot of different models, and the average cost is about $85 per day. Some are more, some are less expensive. But it's a place for folks who have all sorts of needs to come during the day, whether they don't want to be alone during the day or they can't be alone during the day for a variety of reasons. And we saw a huge reduction in both cognitive impairment, increase in falls, increase in hospitalizations when we shut down in tracking the individuals that were in these programs. So it really is a very important level of care. And I also run a home care agency. So as we spoke about earlier, the workforce shortage is so high in those areas because we're looking at one-to-one care. This is group care, right? So the staff is stable. Individuals are coming together in groups, and it's really showing a lot of reduction in social isolation. So.
Lori, maybe you should talk about some of the things that happen, because are these, like at your adult days, like at least, because there used to be like a men's group, there's some bingo, that they're active.
Is there
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just to give an idea.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. Yeah, there's lots going on, and there's lots of programs that are developed. We've had individuals that come to the program that English is a second language, and so they're teaching their language to some of the participants that are there. They're showing them about the culture and the food, and we have men's groups and gardening groups and brain healthy activities, lots of physical activities, lots of, we use the walking program from the Arthritis Foundation. Here in Manchester, we coordinate with the Courier to bring in art programming, and so there's a lot of really engaging opportunities for individuals. And what we hear, a comment I heard earlier, is folks are coming too little too late. So instead of coming maybe when the opportunity would present itself earlier for an individual to come to Adult Day and really engage and benefit, and they're coming when they're just waiting for a bed in a nursing home. And so they missed out on all of that opportunity to really benefit from an Adult Day.
Lori, can you talk about the eligibility though, who would be, how they would get enrolled?
Yep, we're licensed to the state of New Hampshire, Adult Days are, and they need a physician's order in order to be an Adult Day. We are 18 years of age and older. I would say our average age is in the 70s to 101. So that's really it. Someone that's really looking to have a place to be during the day. Certainly you get your meals. For some people, it's their only meal during the day. So a lot of some of our folks don't have any caregivers, don't have any family, friends, and then we have on the other end of the spectrum as well. Lots of caregivers.
Thank you for sharing that, Lori.
I'm just curious, how many people are here from agencies? Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good to see you.
Are you the Easter Seal? My daughter works there. She works in the building.
Question about that daycare, that adult daycare. If you need a doctor's note in order to qualify for it, does that make it an insurance benefit?
I'm sorry, I was talking.
The adult day, you said you need a doctor's note in order to qualify to be allowed in. Does that make it a medical benefit in any way? So therefore your insurance or Medicaid or Medicare will be paying that $85?
Medicare is not a Medicare certified program. At this point, it's not recognized as that. Medicaid does pay under both the straight Medicaid as well as the Choices for Independence program. We also have a variety of different grants that cover through the Old Americans Act. Veterans, if you're a veteran, we also have the VA programs. We also have some folks do tap into their long-term care insurance for Adult Day as well.
Thank you. So we have 5 more minutes left, so we'll wrap up the Q&A. If there's any last comments or anything? Okay, so you're probably wondering what's going to happen after our listening sessions. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to gather all the responses that we've had in all our in-person as well as our virtual listening sessions. We're going to gather all of that as well as all the responses in our survey, and we're going to really identify our key priorities that we want to address to our state plan, and we'll start working on that. Just as a reminder, the survey is open until February 17th, so we still have time, even though our listening sessions are wrapped up. You still have time to fill out the survey. Again, I think we have the paper copy in all your chairs. Feel free to turn them in here, and we'll make sure we get them collected if you have not had a chance to complete them yet. If you want to take them home, just bring them back here and we'll collect them. So again, identify our priorities, and then we will work on our draft, finalize that state plan, and then we'll announce it to the public when our state plan is finalized, and do a campaign to try to push the information out to all of New Hampshire, so that everyone's aware of exactly what our plan is. Sorry. And this last slide is the one I was speaking about earlier. It has the QR code that you can take your smartphone, and I think you have the QR codes on your handouts as well. You can scan that, and it will take you directly to the survey, and you can take the survey that way. This is also the website, the link to the survey if you want to take it. And then here's our DHHS State Plan on Aging website page. This, again, if you want to take a look at what the current plan is, this has a link to the current state plan that we're currently operating under. It also, it had detailed our listening sessions, but those were wrapped up, so we probably won't have much more detail on there. But it will have the link to the survey on the website as well, so you're able to take that, click to that website, click on the link, and you'll take the survey that way as well. So again, I just want to take the time to say thank you all so much for spending time with us. And feel free, I have some business cards up there. If you ever want to call, email, and share more information with us, you can do it that way. And again, thank you all for coming with us and spending your time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Maybe you can tell them that their parents, their family,